Now in our 25th year, a quarter of a century of service to the worldwide amateur radio community, we are this week in Amateur Radio. Your all-amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. This is podcast edition, number 1319, with a release and air date of Saturday, June 8, 2024. Please take the program to your air following the cue tone.
Found on the amateur radio bands, and streaming on the internet since 1993, serving the amateur radio community with weekly, reliable, amateur radio news and special features, we are this week in Amateur Radio. The worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1319 of This Week in Amateur Radio. We will have the latest from ARRL headquarters on their system's service disruption from last month's cyber attack. ARRL Field Day is now 2 weeks away and we will have all the details on how you can participate. Japanese AM broadcasters suspend transmissions on medium wave to see how it affects their population. Ham Radio 2024 International Amateur Radio Exhibition will be held June 28th to the 30th in Friedrichshafen, Germany. Boeing's Starliner spacecraft successfully docks with the International Space Station. A special delivery from the Moon is on its way to Earth. The International Amateur Radio Union Region 1 has presented a special ham radio challenge. We will have the details. The ARRL Club Grant Program is active once again. We will explain how your club can participate. Parks on the air sweeps across Puerto Rico, while summits on the air sweeps across the European Union. We will explain how you can play games over WinLink. And, picture a giant metal detector with the antenna flown under a helicopter. We will explain how scientists are looking underground with these giant antennas, in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment, along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Anno Benchop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will talk about the ARRL incident of May 2024. Our own amateur radio historian, Bill Continelli, W2XOY returns with another edition of the Ancient Amateur Archives. This week, Bill takes a look back at several legacy radio companies in amateur radio. Bill begins this 4-part series this week with a look at the National Radio Company. And, we will stop by and visit with Bill Saliers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming contests, and more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air, right now. Reporting from our headquarters studio in stormy Albany, New York, this is W2XBS.
And reporting this week from our news bureau in Cortlandville, New York, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from our news bureau in Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, where we have had quite a bit of rain the last couple of days, I'm Dave Wilson, WA2HOY.
And reporting from our news bureau just outside Albany, New York, in the Geek Cave studios, I'm Rich Lawrence, KB2MOB.
And reporting from our news bureau in western Massachusetts, where the maple syrup flows like rain and the moose occasionally show up at town hall meetings. I'm Marvin Turner, W0MET.
And reporting from our Troy, New York News Bureau, where I don't have anything bad to say about this past week's weather, I'm Eric, KD2, RJX.
And reporting from our ham radio outpost in the Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, where the corn is up almost a foot already, and lots of little potato plants are sprouting suddenly. The rest of the guys are looking good, too. I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where summer is starting to peek its head around the corner, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR.
And now, with this week's lead story, here's our own Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
Leading off our news this week, on or around May 12, 2024, the ARRL was the victim of a sophisticated network attack by a malicious international cyber group. ARRL immediately involved the FBI and engaged with the third-party experts to investigate. As phones came back into service at the Connecticut headquarters of the ARRL, The Lee's communications remain sparse and carefully worded about the apparent cyber attack that disabled its networks, servers, and other systems, including Logbook of the World. This serious incident was extensive and categorized by the FBI as unique, compromising network devices, servers, cloud-based systems, and PCs. ARRL management quickly established an incident response team. This has led to an extensive effort to contain and remediate the networks, restore servers, and staff are beginning the testing of applications and interfaces to ensure proper operation. On Thursday, June 6, 2024, the League leadership published the following update. We are aware that certain members believe we should be openly communicating everything associated with this incident. We are working with industry experts, including cyber crime attorneys and the authorities, who have directed us to be conservative and cautious with our communications while restoring the ARRL network. Many of our services and programs have been impacted by this attack. We have been diligently assessing each system to ascertain the extent of the compromise. For example, while the Logbook of the World server and related user data were unaffected, we have taken the precautionary measure to be keeping the service offline until we can ensure the security and integrity of our networks. Similarly, access to online DXCC is unavailable, although individual award data remain secure. Fortunately, some of our key systems, such as the ARRL website and our association membership system, were unaffected. Despite the severity of the attack, no personal information was compromised. Additionally, the ARRL does not store credit card information anywhere on our systems, and we do not collect Social Security numbers. ARRL's association membership system was not impacted by this attack. Members can renew online or by phoning ARRL. Additionally, the online ARRL store is operating as normal. ARRL Field Day merchandise is still available for immediate shipping. The digital edition of the July 2024 issue of QST is now available and was released on Friday, June 7th. The print edition will go to press on Monday, June 10th. Members may also access digital editions of QST dating back to 2012 and current and previous issues of On the Air, QEX, and NCJ magazines back to 2020. As previously reported, the ARRL Volunteer Examiner Coordinator is processing amateur radio license applications received from volunteer examiners who completed candidate exam sessions. As of June 6th, our staff are processing applications from exams given on May 22nd. As previously reported, W1AW, the Hiram Percy Maxim Memorial Station, is fully operational with voice, CW, and digital bulletins, code practice, and qualifying runs. The station continues to welcome visiting operators during normal visiting hours. The ARRL June VHF contest is June 8th through the 10th, 2024. Online log submissions will be supported as usual. The log submission function was similarly supported for the recent ARRL digital contest held June 1st and 2nd. The publication of most ARRL e-newsletters, including the weekly ARRL letter, has resumed with minimal disruptions to regular schedules. A new platform for emailing newsletters has been implemented, leading to some variations in the layout. The League concluded the latest update by saying, "We understand the frustration and inconvenience this incident has caused, and we sincerely appreciate your patience and understanding as our dedicated staff and partners continue to work tirelessly to restore affected systems and services."
Serving the amateur radio community for a quarter century, you are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, heard around the world on the amateur bands and streaming on the Internet.
"2024 ARRL Field Day is June 22nd and 23rd, just 2 weeks away. John Ross, KD8 IDJ, is here with all the details.
There is still time to get your official merchandise in time for the event. ARRL is even offering free U.S. shipping on Field Day orders of $30 or more with code FD2024. Plus, if you use that code, you'll get a bonus 2024 ARRL Field Day pin automatically in your order. And that offer ends on Monday, June 10th. The theme for 2024 ARRL Field Day is Be Radioactive. All amateurs and prospective hams are encouraged to use the Field Day station locator at www.arrl.org/field-day-locator. Do just that. Sites are encouraged to have a Get on the Air Go-To station for visitors interested in being able to get on the air from the Field Day location. In a change to the rules for 2024, each Go-To contact adds 5 bonus points, with no limit on the number of Go-To contacts. We don't want people who are actively operating to hit a points plateau and give up, said ARRL Radio Sport and Regulatory Information Manager Bart Janke, W9JJ. This way, each contact adds bonus points, and it should give people a reason to stay radioactive. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Complete rules and other resources for the event may be found at www.arrl.org/field-day. We hope to hear your club on the air.
13 private radio companies in Japan are looking at what a full transition to FM or shutdown would mean for their AM services. The broadcasters are taking advantage of a policy announced last year by the Japanese Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications that allows them to suspend operations for as long as 1 year. The first wave of stations beginning to go dark on AM on February 1st of 2024, and most plan to be off the air until January 31 of 2025. In total, 34 AM stations operated by the 13 companies will shut down for at least a portion of the year. Japanese public broadcaster NHK is not participating in the AM suspensions. During the suspension period, broadcasters are expected to make their programming available via FM, cable TV, internet distribution, or other methods. 4 AM stations in the areas would not be adequately served via an alternative means, and they were not allowed to suspend their operations. The Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications established that the AM suspension measure in order to verify the impact of AM shutdown on broadcasters and listeners. The ministry noted that the costs of maintaining AM services are increasingly difficult for private broadcasters, leading them to consider converting their operations to FM or simply shutting them down. The end of the suspension measure coincides with the license renewal cycle for AM broadcasters, and according to a report in Japan today, it will be up to each company to decide what to do. In 2014, Japan began licensing new FM stations in the 90 to 94.9 megahertz portion of the VHF band, vacated after digital TV went out. Traditionally, FM radio in Japan operates on 76.1 to 89.9 megahertz. Referred to as wide FM, the expanded band channels have been used for FM complimentary relay stations that act as repeaters for AM stations to help counter coverage issues in urban areas, mountainous regions, disaster resiliency, and areas subject to interference from foreign transmission. AM station operators cite the increasing cost of maintaining and upgrading facilities that far exceed the cost of stations that broadcast FM. They also note that FM radio and other forms of transmissions are not prone to the same static and noise that can plague an AM signal. Many AM broadcasters are already offering something called wide-range FM as an alternative, allowing the same programs to be broadcast on FM radio, including public safety announcements for disaster preparedness. The increased popularity of podcasts also affects the number of radio listeners. Japan's Communications Ministry says the trial shutdown could finish as late as January 2025. At that point, the broadcasters will have to either make up their minds as to whether to return to the air or go silent forever.
Ham Radio 2024 International Amateur Radio Exhibition will be held June 28th through the 30th in Friedrichshafen, Germany on Lake Constance. This year's theme is 60 Years of Islands on the Air, Technology Meets Adventure. The 47th edition of this amateur radio exhibition will bring together amateur radio operators from all over the world. Ham Radio is Europe's largest trade fair for radio enthusiasts, with over 300 commercial exhibitors and associations showcasing their extensive range of products and training courses on various radio technology topics. New this year is the Innovation Hub of the International Amateur Radio Union and the extension to 2 career days. Returning this year is Ham Camp, where young radio enthusiasts and youth organizations spend the night in the exhibition hall, connecting with like-minded individuals of the same age who share their passion for radio. ARRL will be represented with a delegation this year, greeting members and friends from the global amateur radio community and networking with other national radio societies. Tickets for the event can be purchased at ticketshop-messafrischen GMHB. That address online is messafrischen.de.
The Federal Communications Commission's Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau wants to know if you noticed any impacts to radio communications during the recent solar storm activity. John Ross, KD8IDJ, has more.
In a public notice, the FCC wrote, to better understand the impacts of the geomagnetic storm on the U.S. communications sector, the Bureau is requesting information from communication service providers and the public regarding disruptions in the communications between May 7th and May 11th, 2024, that it believes to be a result of that solar storm. The Bureau is encouraging commenters to provide any available evidence, particularly electromagnetic spectrum analyses, imagery, or chronological logs relating to the storm's impacts. Where possible, the Bureau asks that the comments include the description of the impacts, make and model of the affected communications equipment, which could include transmitters, receivers, transceivers, switches, routers, and amplifiers, and also make, model, and type of affected antennae and their composition, frequencies affected, type of composition of cable adjoining communications equipment, and the antennae if applicable. Also during the event, any residual effects observed in the hours following restoration. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Comments may be submitted using FCC's electronic comment filing system at www.fcc.gov/ECFS and referring to FS Docket 24-161. ARRL's guide to filing comments is available at the League website.
The ARRL Foundation announces the return of the Club Grant Program for 2024. The program is an opportunity for clubs to apply for grants up to $25,000 to fund projects in their community. The emphasis is given to projects that are of transformational nature, such as a club that has to plan to improve the community through education, recruiting, training, and promotion of amateur radio. The application period will open up at 9 a.m. Eastern Time on June 3rd and close at 4 p.m. Eastern Time on July 26th. Clubs across the country are urged to apply. The program is not restricted to the ARRL-affiliated clubs or 501c3 clubs. Those clubs that were awarded grants will be required to share updates and participate in social media and reporting with the ARRL. Information about the Club Grant Program can be found on the League's webpage. The ARRL Club Grant Program is made possible through generous funding by the Amateur Radio Digital Communications.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
2024 ARRL Field Day is June 22nd and 23rd. To tell us more about the amateur radio's favorite annual event and how to find a field day operation near you, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, at League headquarters.
The annual event is part emergency communications exercise, part operating event, and part open house for amateur radio. No matter what your local club makes a field day, it is sure to be a good opportunity for hams and members of the public to gather socially in a public place and celebrate the joy of radio and wireless communication. ARRL's Field Day Locator at www.arrl.org/fielddaylocator is an interactive tool to help you find a field day site near you or to list your club's field day location so that members of the public and the media may attend. Populating your group's information into the database is easy. ARRL Radio Sport and Regulatory Manager Bart Janke, W9JJ, says social media should always be used to let interested people know where you are going to be. Use social media before and during 2024 ARRL Field Day to help people find you. Let them know what your plans are, who is going to be there, and what they can expect if they visit, he said. Making newcomers feel welcome and getting them involved is important. Get them on the air. Show them how to make contacts with the GOTA, Get on the Air station, encouraged ARRL Contest Program Manager Paul Bork, N1 SFE. People may not remember what you show and tell them, but they will always remember how you made them feel welcomed and involved by allowing them to participate. Your time in showing a newcomer what radio is all about is an investment in the future of ham radio. To encourage visitors to come to the event, Janke recommends contacting local dignitaries or served agency partners who frequently attend Field Day events. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
For complete rules and promotional materials for 2024's Field Day, visit the Field Day landing page on League's webpage.
NASA astronauts Suni Williams, KD-5 PLB, and Butch Wilmore at last launched into space on the morning of Wednesday, the 5th of June, aboard the first Boeing Starliner, following a series of aborted attempts and delays tied to technical issues dating back to May. The pair are scheduled to stay on the International Space Station for about 10 days. NASA's Commercial Crew Program has a $4.3 billion contract with commercial space transport providers, and the two astronauts comprise Boeing's first crewed mission in that program. The new Starliner capsule and an inaugural two-member NASA crew safely docked with the International Space Station on Thursday, meeting a key test in proving the vessel's flight worthiness and sharpening Boeing's competition with Elon Musk's SpaceX. The rendezvous was achieved despite an earlier loss of several guidance-controlled jet thrusters, some of them due to a helium propulsion leak, which NASA and Boeing said should not compromise the mission. The CST-100 Starliner arrived at the orbiting platform after a flight of nearly 27 hours following its launch from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. The reusable gumdrop-shaped capsule, dubbed Calypso by its crew, was lofted into space on Wednesday atop an Atlas V rocket furnished and flown by Boeing Lockheed Martin's United Launch Alliance joint venture. On arrival, Whitmore, 58, and Williams, 61, spent about 2 hours conducting a series of standard procedures, such as checking for airlock leaks and pressurizing the passage between the capsule and the ISS before opening the entry hatches. A live NASA feed showed the smiling new arrivals wearing their blue flight suits, weightlessly floating headfirst through the padded passageway, one after the other into the station. Williams was first. "We're just as happy as can be to be up in space," she said during a brief welcoming ceremony a short time later. They were greeted warmly with hugs and handshakes by the outpost's current 7 resident crew members, 4 fellow U.S. astronauts, and 3 Russian cosmonauts. Plans call for Whitmore and Williams to remain aboard the station for about 8 days, then depart on a return flight that will take Starliner on a fiery re-entry back through Earth's atmosphere and end with a parachute and airbag-assisted landing in the U.S. desert Southwest, a first for a crewed NASA mission. "It is nice to be attached to the big city in the sky," Wilmore radioed to Mission Control in Houston shortly after docking with the space station.
The BBC is reporting that Earth is expecting its first rock and soil samples from the far side of the Moon. China's mission to the dark side of the Moon is returning with that precious cargo, the first samples of its kind gathered during any lunar exploration. The Chinese National Space Administration mission faced special challenges. Among them, the uncrewed Chang mission relied on communication with a specially deployed relay satellite because there is no direct radio communication with the dark side of the Moon.
It is time for the Volunteer Monitor Program Report. The Volunteer Monitor Program is a joint initiative between the ARRL and the FCC to enhance compliance in the amateur radio service. This is the activity report of the VM program. Operators in Arizona, Tennessee, Virginia, and South Carolina were issued advisory notices concerning wideband operation, 7 kHz to 8 kHz wide, contrary to FCC rules. Section 97.307 Subpart A provides that no amateur shall occupy more bandwidth than necessary for the information rate and emission type being transmitted in accordance with good amateur practice. Technician class operators in Colorado and North Carolina received advisory notices for operating FT8 on 20 meters. Technicians have no 20-meter operating privileges. An operator in New York received an advisory notice for failure to identify during long transmissions of more than 30 minutes. A general class operator in Idaho received an advisory notice for single sideband transmissions on 14.150 MHz. General class privileges start at 14.225 MHz on that band. Meanwhile, operators in Florida received commendations for work on the 146.625 MHz W4JUP repeater, assisting new licensees to learn repeater procedures, and setting up equipment. An operator in Oklahoma received a commendation for work on the 146.97 W5BLW repeater for skywarn and emergency operations procedures. During the month, there was one referral from the FCC to the VM program, and one meeting was held with the FCC. The totals for monitoring this month were 1,942 hours on HF frequencies and 1,935 hours on VHF frequencies and above, for a total of 3,877 hours of monitoring. We thank Volunteer Monitor Program Administrator Riley Hollingsworth, K4ZDH, for this report.
The most recent ARRL section manager elections ending on May 10th resulted in 2 incumbent section managers being re-elected for another 2-year term. Both will continue with the work that they have been doing in their sections. In the Northern Florida section, Scott Roberts, KK4 ECR, held a lead over challenger James Kvachik, K8JK. This will be Roberts' second term as section manager. The vote count for the election was 657 for Roberts and 308 for Kvachik. In the Indiana section, incumbent Bob Burns, AK94, defeated challenger Brian Jenks, W9BGJ. The vote count ended with Burns receiving 684 votes and Jenks receiving 161 votes. Congratulations to both returning section managers.
Hams to need to send email using only radio frequencies understand the power of WinLink, especially when the messages they send and receive contain vital information during an earthquake, hurricane, or some other emergency. Now WinLink is showing its more playful side. It's fun with a purpose. If you're a fan of Wordle, the web-based guessing game involving 5-letter words, you're in luck. In fact, if you're an amateur radio operator who also is a fan of WinLink, you're in even more luck. Meet HamWord, a game that allows amateurs to keep their WinLink skills sharp while engaging in a Wordle-style game. Now in its second year, HamWord has also won fans in at least 22 countries, and more than 5,700 individual games have been played. Since it's only a game, you don't even have to be near your rig to play. You can use the Telnet interface over the web to send a 5-letter word to the WinLink tactical call sign, HamWord. That's HamWord, all one word. You still need a ham license and a functioning WinLink account, though. Mark said that he has great hopes more hams will get in the game, which had the simple purpose at the outset of helping people with their WinLink proficiency. His feelings about the support that HamWord has gained can be best described by a 5-letter word, GREAT. To learn more, visit the link you can find at hambooks.org.
Now celebrating our 25th year keeping the amateur radio community around the world informed, you are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available worldwide as a podcast from our web at twiar.net.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX. I'm Bill, AJB. There's a lot going on, so let's get right to it. Here's what's happening in the world of DX. This section of DX News comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com and I'll make sure that Bernie sets you up. The FT-4GL Expedition to Glorioso, a solo operation by FH-4 Mark, is in its second week with well over 31,000 QSOs in the log. Originally, FT-8 contacts were made using MSHV, but Foxhound mode is up and running as of June 2nd. The internet connection on the island is, quote, very bad, so F8CRS is uploading logs to ClubLog and handling verification requests. The following update is from W2IRT Peter, one of the pilot stations. Quote, since the start of the FT4GL operation, all FT8 activities have been made using MSHV software since Mark was unable to get WSJTX functioning for Foxhound mode. As of 0 Zulu on 02 June, the support personnel were successfully able to get WSJTX working as it should, and Mark is now using Foxhound mode with that software. If WSJT fails again, FT8 activities will presumably resume in MSHV, end quote. I've been fortunate enough to work them a couple times, and if you catch them right, I won't say it's easy, but it's not nearly as bad as I anticipated. So I hope you're trying, and good luck. The Northern California DX Foundation, NCDXF, is pleased to announce its financial support of $2,000 for the DXpedition by YL2GM Juris to VK9LA Lord Howe Island and KH8 American Samoa in June and July of 2024. Ned AA7A writes in his recommendation to the NCDXF board, quote, one of the most prolific DXpeditioners today, Juris Peterson, YL2GM, has requested assistance from NCDXF to activate VK9L from 14 to 24 June 2024 and KH8 a few days later for another week. The Foundation has supported Juris on at least 10 other DXpeditions that I can point to. These were either solo operation or teams he led conducting operations in 3 Charlie, 3 Charlie 0, T30, C21, ZS8, S21, EP, 9U, ZD9, VU7, and quite possibly other places that I've overlooked. His activation of ZD9 was nothing short of superhuman in my opinion. So wherever Juris goes with a radio, he can be counted upon to create quite a commotion on the bands. While VK9L and KH8 sit at number 61 and 72 respectively on the global list of ClubLog's most wanted, and number 63 and number 43 on the European filtered list, an activation of these two entities by Juris and his traveling partner will create quite a lot of excitement, end quote. The mission of the NCDXF is to provide necessary financial support for well-organized DXpeditions to desirable DXCC entities and to support advances in DXpeditioning skills, technology, and infrastructure. Those funds come from the contribution of our supporters in the DX community. Your contribution will help make DX happen. Visit our website, ncdxf.org. Respectfully submitted, Craig Thompson, K9CT, NCDXF Vice President. And as always, if you can't get these URLs down and you want some information, you can drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. So here's the latest update on the CY9C St. Paul Island DXpedition scheduled for August 26th to September 5th. W0GJ, W0PR, and WA4DAN had a very productive work session this week preparing for the CY9C DXpedition. We unboxed and tested all 7 of the new Honda EU2200 generators. We ran the generators with a substantial load and checked the voltage on each one. All 7 generators were right at specification. We then inventory and organized the guy ropes for the spider poles. We inventoried the low band antennas and the hardware needed for those, and then we inventoried all the bandpass filters. During the afternoon work session, we installed one of the new operating tents. This was exciting, and we were impressed with these new tents. We were so impressed, in fact, we ordered a 4th tent for the DXpedition. We tested the new operating tables and chairs inside the tent for the optimum configuration. The second workday was spent cleaning and working with the Yagi antennas. Each antenna was washed and thoroughly cleaned, as these Yagi antennas were used on our CY0S Sable Island DXpedition. During the afternoon session, we assembled and erected each antenna for testing. Each antenna exhibited a VSWR of under 1.5 to 1. The CY9C team continues to seek financial support for the DXpedition. You can contact me, the dxmentor@gmail.com, for information on how to make a contribution. That's all for now. 73s from Murray, WA4DAN. The DXpedition to Pitcairn Island, VP6DF, is well underway. WJ2O Dave has been on 160 through 10 meter CW as VP6DF since May 30th and will continue through June 10th. He has reported, quote, great runs on 17 meters late last week. You can QSL the VP6DF via N2ZN and Logbook of the World. As a reminder, Elvira IV3FSG will be active as 5U5K from Niger June 6th to the 20th. She will operate 160 through 6 meter sideband, FT8, FT4 using MSHV in multi-stream mode, RIDI, and maybe some CW. Francesco IK0XBX will be her pilot station, and you can QSL direct to IK2 DUW. The band plan for the 5U5K DXpedition appears on the QRZ page for them, and there will be an online log and live stream as well. More information will follow as soon as it becomes available, and you can bet that I'll have it here. We have another DXpedition to America Samoa, Kilo Hotel 8. N5DD Don, W5MJ Madison, K5PI Robert, and VE7KW Keith are headed to American Samoa to operate as KH8T September 2nd to the 16th. They plan to have 2 stations on 80 through 10 meter CW, sideband, and FT8, and may also include 160 and 6. They will have 2 linear amplifiers, hex beams, and verticals. QSL can go through M0URX. Their website contains more information, including their band plan.
We will be back with more from our DX mentor, Bill Sawyer's AJ8B, after we take this quick pause for stations along the network to identify. You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio.
F4FKT reports on his upcoming FT4YM operation from Antarctica, mid-October 2024 to March of 2025. His station will be 100 to 300 watts to a multi-band vertical on 20, 15, 17, 10, and maybe 12 meters, using sideband FT8, FT4, and maybe the geostationary QO100 satellite that covers Europe and Africa and apparently beyond. You can QSL this DXpedition to Antarctica to F4FKT, Club Log, or Logbook of the World. G0KOM Adrian has found a QTH to set up a station on the UK sovereign base areas in Cyprus, prefix Zulu Charlie 4, quote, slightly inland but within the sovereign bases area, where I can operate 24/7, end quote. He will be on as ZC4MK, July 10th to July 16th. And then leave on the 17th. He is figuring out his optimum antenna options, but knows for sure that on 6 meters he will run 100 watts to a 5-element Yagi. So we have an update on Bouvet, 3Y0K. And unfortunately, the update is that they've canceled it. The existing sailboat contract had been canceled and there will be no January 2025 DXpedition. We're now working on securing a large vessel and helicopter for the 3Y0 Kilo Bouvet DXpedition anticipated for 2025-2026. We're currently negotiating these contracts and we will make an announcement for Bouvet when we're ready. Along with Bouvet, here's an update on the Peter I 2027 DXpedition. Peter I is the number 8 most wanted. We plan to activate Peter I Island in February 2027 with a team of 19 operators. We have signed a financial agreement with a private group about sharing the cost for this DXpedition. The DXpedition budget and our share is around $825,000, of which we must deposit $340,000 in 2024. We will go to Peter I with a large vessel and 2 helicopters, and the DXpedition will be led by an external expedition leader from an Antarctic expedition company, Spirit of Sydney. The capacity on the expedition leader and the vessel have been reviewed and approved by Norwegian Polar Institute, and that's the basis for the landing permit we received in April of 2024. Our expedition leader has supported more than 80-plus expeditions to Antarctica and has previously landed on Peter the First 3 times. With the landing permit and external resources involved, we're ready to move forward negotiating and signing the contracts. It should be noted that the total cost of this expedition is approximately $2 million, including all logistics, marine, aviation, insurance, safety and rescue, and Antarctica permits. However, the synergies with the small private group and with the Spirit of Sydney Expedition Company have provided enough cost sharing to make this Peter the First expedition affordable, albeit still expensive. This is a rare opportunity to activate Peter the First, and without these unique opportunities to share costs, Peter the First would not be possible. At the time of activation in 2027, it will be 21 years since the last de-expedition to this island, and cost is the primary reason. We have a unique occasion to bring Peter the First back on the air. We're grateful for any donation that can help us sign the above contracts. Despite it being almost 3 years until the de-expedition time, the size of the deposit requires us to start fundraising now to be able to sign the vessel contracts. If you want to donate and help make this de-expedition a success, please visit the website 3y0.no. That's www.3y0.no. Proceed to the Peter the First section and donate through the link on the website. We expect a short time of a few weeks to a month to raise the funds needed to pay our first deposit of $200,000 soon after signing the vessel contracts. De-expedition planning will start by the fall of 2025, but at this time we only raise funds to be able to pay the deposits required in 2024. 7 threes from the Peter the First Leadership Group. And right at press time, I came up with another update, and this is from LA7 GIA Ken. We're seeking more sideband CW operators to Peter the First Island de-expedition. The dates are confirmed, January 28 to February 26, 2027. We've received the landing permit from Norwegian Polar Institute and are currently negotiating the vessel contract. This de-expedition team will consist of 19 operators, where we currently have 10. We're now seeking an additional 3 to 4 operators to this de-expedition within a short time. Please contact us at admin@3yankee0.no. And I'm sorry, that's admin@3y0.no. This is an expensive de-expedition with a high participation fee, duration of 30 days plus, and travel time. And again, if you want more details and some specifics, you can always email me, thedxmentor@gmail.com. KH0/KC0W, Tom, has now been on Saipan Island in the Northern Mariana Islands for over 5 years and has managed close to 100,000 contacts. In the past several days, he has worked just over 325 stations on 6 meters. Tom's 6-meter equipment includes an Elecraft KX3, a Juma PA1000 amplifier running 800 watts into a hex beam at 53 feet. He is in grid locator QK25UE. 6-meter openings that Tom has experienced have been exclusively into Japan and China with booming signals on FT8, but not very good luck on CW, as no one is there. He has had no luck into North America or Europe. He is contemplating on purchasing a large 50-foot boomed 6-meter Yagi since he has enough room for it on the roof of his condo. JY4CH Hytham is in Amman, the capital of Jordan. He is running an IC7200 into a high-gain TH5 tribander for 10, 15, and 20. He's running 70 watts. On 6 meters, he can use the TH5 with an SWR of 1.3 to 1. Hytham is in grid locator KM71WX, so keep an eye out for him. The latest episode of the DX Mentor, number 43, features NE8Z Rick, who is best known by HD8MD or HC2MD. That podcast has been posted and is now available wherever you get your podcasts. Rick is a fascinating guy. He has spent a lot of time in the Galapagos Islands and actually is one of the few people that has been able to operate from Mount Athos, although he only made 1 QSO. So if you get a chance, you should listen to that. It's very, very interesting. Until next week, this is Bill, AJ8B, saying 7-3, and I hope to see you in the pileups.
Do you have a mind-blowing idea you would like to share with the community? The International Amateur Radio Union Region 1 is inviting you to come with a game-changing idea which increases awareness of amateur radio. We are looking for your cool idea or project which you think is part of the future of amateur radio. So get together, make a team, share your idea, present your proposal, and bring this to reality. This is the time to present amateur radio with a different perspective, and IARU Region 1 is looking for you. The best proposals will be rewarded. Don't miss this opportunity. The challenges are as follows. Challenge number 1. Do you know that Guglielmo Marconi was the first radio amateur operator? He was born in 1874, and we are celebrating the 150th anniversary of his birth. Marconi made some of the most revolutionary inventions of the last centuries. They totally changed the speed of communication in a real global manner and permitted a totally different way of living. Are you aware that radio amateurs are active in exploring the possibilities of radio waves following Marconi's footsteps? We would like to know how his inventions changed and are still changing your life. Share and explain it in a fun way in which you believe it will be attractive and known by more people. Here is a hint on this challenge. We are not looking for a long plain text, but for content to share on social media and reach a huge audience. Make use of reels, pictures, etc. No limits on creativity. Challenge number 2. Use your imagination. What will amateur radio look like in 10 years? Yes, we are talking about the future. Amateur radio is changing. In the past, we never heard about satellites, digimodes, or SDR. And these are just a few examples. We ask you to share a cool idea or project which you believe will be changing amateur radio, but is also fun to share. This could be in the direction of a technology project, experimentation, or digital development. Don't be limited. We ask you to share your ideas which are contributing to the amateur radio community. The HAMChallenge is a call for ideas. The best proposal will be rewarded and brought to life. Visit the IARU Region 1 website for all the details.
Are you ready for another excursion into amateur radio history? This is Bill Continelli, W2XOY, and I'll be back in a moment with another installment of the Ancient Amateur Archives.
You're listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available worldwide as a podcast from our web at www.twir.net.
Among railroad enthusiasts, they are known as fallen flags, rail companies that have disappeared from the American scene. Some, such as the New York, Ontario, and Western Railway, were completely abandoned, their rails torn up, and the right-of-way slowly returning to nature. Others, such as the Erie, the New York Central, the Pennsylvania Railroad, and, most recently, Conrail, disappeared in the black hole of corporate mergers, their infrastructure living on under another name. Amateur radio also has its fallen flags, radio companies that once dominated the RF landscape of our hobby, but now are gone. Some went bankrupt, their assets sold and their factories torn down to make way for urban renewal. Others, facing the harsh competitive realities in a small amateur market, abandon ham radio and turn to other, more profitable communication activities. In the next few installments, we will look at our fallen flags, starting with the National Radio Company. National began life in 1914 as, believe it or not, a toy company. From 1914 through the early 1920s, the National Toy Company made a healthy profit on toys and household goods. During World War I, National made airplane parts and thread gauges. In 1922, National reached a crossroad. The broadcast business was booming, and there was a severe shortage of quality radio components needed to build receivers. The largest manufacturer of variable capacitors at that time was Cardwell. Note that name, we'll be seeing it again. The demand for capacitors far exceeded Cardwell's ability to supply, and National, always seeking new profitable markets, began manufacturing variable capacitors. In 1924, National was approached by two Harvard engineers, Glenn Browning and Fred Drake. They wanted National to manufacture their Browning-Drake tuner, which was a vast improvement over other broadcast band tuners then on the market. National agreed, and the tuner became so popular that the company decided to drop all of its non-radio products, change its name, and concentrate on radio receivers and components. They began looking for someone to guide the company exclusively into the radio market, and in 1927 hired a young man named James Millen as chief engineer and general manager. In 1928, National introduced the SW2, followed in the 1930s by the SW3, SW4, and SW5. The SW stood for shortwave, and the number indicated how many tubes the unit had. These were high-quality regenerative receivers, very popular with shortwave listeners and amateurs. Production on this series lasted 20 years until 1948. Other early receivers from National, designed exclusively for the broadcast market, included the MB-29, introduced in 1929, and the MB-30 in 1930. Both of these units were tuned radio frequency receivers with several stages of RF amplification. In 1935, National introduced the receiver that would carry it through the next 30 years, the HRO. This radio had a crystal filter, 2 RF stages, and a dial mechanism that was so accurate the receiver could be set within 1 kilocycle of the desired frequency. The 1930s also witnessed National's venture into the UHF spectrum with the Model 1-10. This was a super regenerative receiver that covered 27 megacycles all the way up to 300 megacycles. World War II brought a massive increase in National's business. Employment swelled from 250 to over 2,500 as the company fulfilled its government contracts. In the post-war market, National held its own. The HRO receiver was still growing strong and was joined by various other receivers, the NC100, the NC200, and the NC300. For the beginning shortwave listener, or novice amateur, National introduced the affordable NC60, which covered the broadcast and shortwave bands from 550 kilocycles to 30 megacycles. I remember using this radio 30 years ago in my novice days. National also had some transmitters and transceivers, but their market share wasn't as strong as Collins, Heathkit, Hallicrafters, or E.F. Johnson. In 1964, the HRO finally reached the end of its production life. Also that year, the National Radio Company sold its capacitor division. The purchaser? The Cardwell Condenser Corporation, National's old nemesis from the 1920s. In 1965, National introduced its last classic, the HRO 500. This was a fully synthesized, transistorized receiver that covered 5 kilohertz through 30 megahertz in 60 separate 500 kilohertz segments. It was an outstanding receiver for use by the military, government agencies, or amateurs willing to pay top dollar for the very best. By the late 1960s, the Japanese were jumping into the U.S. amateur market with low-cost units. High-end companies such as National simply couldn't compete. Throughout the early 70s, National gradually faded from the amateur market and concentrated on government contracts. In the early 1970s, the National Radio Company went through bankruptcy. After reorganization, they emerged from bankruptcy and continued to supply the government with various radio products, including the HRO 500. Time was not on their side, however, and in 1991, the National Radio Company filed bankruptcy for the second and last time. The remaining assets of this once proud company were put on the auction block. And yes, in case you're wondering, the purchaser was the Cardwell Condenser Corporation. In our next installment, we will look at a company that was formed by one of National's former employees as well as a famous amateur radio manufacturer whose name started with H. Which of the three possible companies am I talking about? So, until then, check out the internet auction sites for any HRO or SW3 receiver. They're a great investment.
An ARRL, the National Association for Amateur Radio Affiliated Club, the Jackson Amateur Radio Club, serving the metro area of Jackson, Mississippi, recently donated 2 3D printers with a retail value of $3,000 to the library system in Madison County. With more details on this club donation, we go to League headquarters, where John Ross, KD8IDJ, files this report.
Thank you, Jackson Amateur Radio Club, for all you have done for our library. We so appreciate you, said MCLS Director Tammy Terry. The $2,000 donation of amateur radio books a few months ago is already in circulation. JARC President Jim Armstrong, AK5J, added, "We enjoy our hobby a great deal, but public service and teaching the public about amateur radio is an integral part of our 75-year history here in the Jackson metropolitan area. We have worked out a formal partnership between our club and the Madison County Library System, and we are making our second donation of material and equipment and STEM-oriented programming to Madison County's libraries. Our intent is to make this support an ongoing project of our club." Dr. Frank Howe, K4FMH, Assistant Director of the ARRL Delta Division, said, "The club is a national leader in partnering with public libraries. The Gallup organization has studied libraries, finding that women and young people across the U.S. visit them at over twice the rate that they attend movie theaters. The local public library is the most common cultural crossroad in the United States." David Norris, K5UZ, Director of ARRL's Delta Division, comprising Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Tennessee, has promoted the Plant the Seed initiative. "We have been very enthusiastic about the concept and program that Dr. Howell has created." The JARC is a local area club comprised of licensed amateur radio operators. They also offer SMART, which stands for Saturday Morning Amateur Radio Time, workshops at the MCLS branches. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
The ARRL library book set includes the most popular publications and is intended for ARRL affiliated clubs and members who wish to gift or donate a set to the local library, school, or classroom. The set is available at a special price of $250, which includes U.S. ground shipping.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web. Podcasts are available.
The 2024 ARRL Kids Day event will take place on June 15th and June 22nd and 23rd. Kids Day is designed to give on-the-air experience to young people and foster interest in getting a license of their own. It is also intended to give older hams a chance to share their station and love for amateur radio with the children in their lives. Kids Day always runs from 1800 UTC through 2359 UTC, and you can operate as much or as little as you like. The suggested frequencies for Kids Day are 10 meters, 28.350 to 28.400 megahertz, 12 meters, 24.960 to 24.980 megahertz, 15 meters, 21.360 to 21.400 megahertz, 17 meters, 18.140 to 18.145 megahertz, 20 meters, 14.270 to 14.300 megahertz, 40 meters, 7.270 to 7.290 megahertz, and 80 meters, 3.740 to 3.940 megahertz. You can also use your favorite local repeater with permission of the repeater's sponsor. Be sure to observe third-party restrictions when making DXQSOs. All participants are eligible to receive a colorful certificate. You can download this certificate and complete it with the participant's name and date of contact. Search Kids Day on the League's webpage for more information.
Our first story on AMSAT satellite shorts from all over begins in China, where we find the Chinese Chang'e 6 probe is set to land on the far side of the moon this weekend, aiming to return lunar samples to Earth. Launched on May 3rd, the robotic mission entered lunar orbit 5 days earlier and was targeted for a touchdown on Saturday night, June 1st, for those in North America. The mission will study its landing area in the South Pole Aitken Basin, collecting samples over 3 days before the ascent module returns to lunar orbit. These samples will be transferred to a return to Earth module with a scheduled Earth landing on June 25th. Once returned, the samples will be examined in Beijing and made available to the scientific community for research. This mission builds on the success of Chang'e 5, which returned 61 ounces of lunar material in 2020 and aims to provide insights into the moon's magmatic processes and mantle properties. Next up is Blue Origin, who resumes cruise space flights on May 19th after nearly 2-year hiatus following a rocket mishap in 2022, which left Virgin Galactic as the sole operator in the suborbital tourism market. Among the 6 passengers was Ed Dwight, former Air Force pilot who had been poised to become NASA's first black astronaut in the 1960s. Dwight, at 90 years old, became the oldest person to go to space, expressing the profound impact of the experience. Despite one of the capsule's parachutes failing to fully inflate, the mission was deemed a success, and all passengers returned safely. This flight marks the 7th human mission for Blue Origin, highlighting its ambitions for future space endeavors. The company has now flown 37 people aboard its New Shepard vehicle, named after the first American in space, Alan Shepard. And our final satellite short is some good news. Voyager 1 has resumed transmitting scientific data from 2 of its 4 operational instruments after a computer issue arose in November of 2023. The mission team is working on recalibrating the remaining 2 instruments, with plans to complete this in the coming weeks. This progress follows a 5-month troubleshooting effort during which the spacecraft began sending back usable engineering data. On May 17th, commands were successfully sent to the 46-year-old spacecraft, located over 15 billion miles from Earth, enabling it to resume sending science data. The plasma wave subsystem and magnetometer are now operational, while efforts continue on the cosmic ray subsystem and low-energy charged particle instrument. Launched in 1977, Voyager 1 and its twin, Voyager 2, are NASA's longest operating space vehicle and the first to explore beyond the heliosphere, having flown by Jupiter, Saturn, and, in Voyager 2's case, Uranus and Neptune.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. Today I want to talk about something that might feel only tangentially related to our hobby, but it likely affects you. Recently, the ARRL announced that it was in the process of responding to a serious incident involving access to our network and headquarters-based systems. A day later, it sought to assure the community that the ARRL does not store credit card information, and they do not collect social security numbers, and went on to say that their member database only contains publicly available information. 5 days after that, it's continuing to address a serious incident involving access to our network and systems, and that several services such as Logbook of the World and the ARRL Learning Center are affected, but LOTW data is secure. Over a third of the latest announcement, more than a week ago, was to assure the community that the July QST magazine is on track, but might be delayed for print subscribers. Regardless of how this situation evolves, it's unwelcome news, and much wider reaching than the ARRL. LOTW, or Logbook of the World, is used globally by the amateur community to verify contacts between stations. The IARU, the International Amateur Radio Union, is headquartered at the ARRL office. I've been told that I should have empathy and consider that the ARRL is only a small organisation that may not have the best of the best in technology staff due to budget constraints, and finally that LOTW being down for a few days is not going to kill anyone. All those things might well be true, and mistakes can and do happen. The ARRL has been in existence for well over a century, bills itself as the answer to when all else fails, and has even registered this as a trademark, but hasn't actually said anything useful about an incident that appears to have occurred on the 14th of May, now over 2 weeks ago. By the way, that date is based on the Uptime Robot service showing less than 100% uptime on that day. The ARRL hasn't told us when this all occurred. It didn't even acknowledge that anything was wrong until 2 days later. This raises plenty of uncomfortable questions. What information did you share with the ARRL when you activated your LOTW account? For me, it was over a decade ago. I jumped through the hoops required and managed to create a certificate. What information I shared at the time, I have no idea about. As I've said before, I do know that security was more extreme than required by my bank, even today, and the level of identification required was, in my opinion, disproportionate to the information being processed by the service. Lists of amateur stations contacting each other. Something to take into account, on the 30th of October 2013, Norm, Whiskey 3 India Zulu, wrote in an email to me, quote, "Data is never removed from LOTW," end quote. I have no idea how much or which specific information that refers to. If you use the ARRL Learning Center, what information did you share? If you're a member of the ARRL or you purchased something from their online store, what data was required and stored? Is the data at the IARU affected? What infrastructure other than the office do they share? While I've been talking about the ARRL, this same issue exists with all the other amateur services you use. QRZ.com, EQSLCC, eham.net, clublog.org, your local regulator, your amateur club, your social media accounts. All of it. What information have you shared? Do you have an internet birthday, address and middle name? Recently, I received a meme. It shows two individuals talking about life, the universe and everything. They discuss their favourite books, the first movie they ever watched, the name of their pets, what car they learnt to drive in, their interests, and other things you talk about when you meet someone new and interesting. The last image of the meme shows the heading, "Security Questions Answered. Welcome, Amanda." So my question is this. What's your favourite colour and your mother's maiden name? Seriously, next time you access a service online, have a look at what data that service has. When you sign up, consider the requirements for the service and how much information that's worth. Do you really need to send your birthday, your gender, and your physical address with a copy of your passport or another government-approved identity document? If you're being asked for the name of your first pet, consider answering something unique. In my case, I generate a random string of characters to use as an answer for each security question. The ARRL incident is the tip of the iceberg. This problem isn't going away. It's only going to get bigger and happen more often. Final observation. With the potential of a global shopping list for thieves coming out of the database at the ARRL, will you be sharing your station address next time? And if you're subject to the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, perhaps it's time to ask your online service providers just exactly what they're doing to protect your information, and that includes the ARRL. I have sent 2 emails to the ARRL in relation to these questions, but have yet to receive an acknowledgement, let alone answers. By the time this reaches you, perhaps the ARRL has answers to my questions and more. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. ARRL Field Day is right around the corner. AMSAT holds Field Day on the satellites at the same time. Same basic rules. However, we allow you to work only one contact on an FM satellite. If you jump over to one of the sideband CW satellites, you can make as many contacts as you like with different stations. You can also make digital contacts on IO 117 Green Cube. As you prepare your submission for the ARRL, do not forget to also Enter the AMSAT Field Day by downloading the rules at AMSAT.org. Click on Events, scroll down to the bottom, and click on AMSAT Field Day on the satellites. Finally, email your score sheet to me at both addresses to make sure it goes through, kk5do@arrl.net or kk5do@amsat.org. I will reply usually the same day to acknowledge I received your submission. With your submission, send a few pictures of your station, antennas, or guests watching your satellite contact. A short story is always helpful. I like to add the pictures and the stories into my annual Field Day article in the AMSAT Journal. Submissions are due by the same date and time as the ARRL submissions. Remember, test everything before Field Day. Test everything before Field Day, and test everything before Field Day. You know the one thing you did not test will fail or cannot be found at the Field Day site. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for the weekly propagation forecast report, brought to us each week by Tad Cook, K7RA in Seattle, Washington. This reporting week, May 30th through June 5th, our sun was active, producing 9 new sunspot groups. One emerged on May 30th, another on May 31st, 2 more on June 1st, another on June 2nd, 3 more on June 3rd, and 1 more on June 4th. Average daily sunspot numbers rose from 124.6 to 183.4, and the average daily solar flux moved from 164.8 to 184.8. Looking ahead at the predicted solar flux for the near term, it will be 190 on June 8th and 9th, it will hold steady around 170 on June 10th through the 19th, then move to 180 on June 20th, 190 on June 21st through the 23rd, and then move to 195 on June 24th and 25th. The predicted planetary A index for the near term will be 10 and 8 on June 8th and 9th, 5 on June 10th through the 18th, then move to a value of 8 on June 19th and 20th, and then 5, 8, and 8 on June 21st through the 23rd.
In radio sport this week, many great contests. June 7th, it's the weekly RTTY contest. That is digital. Also on June 7th, the HA3NS Sprint Memorial Contest, CW there. June 8th and 9th, the Batavia DX Contest, that's phone. And also on June 8th, the VK Shires Contest, CW and phone. The Asia Pacific Sprint Single Sideman, that's phone. And on June 8th and 9th, the Portugal Day Contest, CW and phone. June 8th and the 9th, it's the SKCC Weekend Sprintathon, CW. On June 8th, it's the AGCW VHF UHF Contest, that's CW. June 8th and 9th, the GACW WWSA CWDX Contest, CW. And the REF DDFM 6-meter Contest, that's CW and phone. And on June 8th through the 10th, it's the ARRL June VHF Contest. That is CW and phone. And remember, you can visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions on June 9th is the Breeze Shooters Hamfest, hosting the ARRL Western Pennsylvania Section Convention. That's in Butler, Pennsylvania. June 15th, the ARRL Maine State Convention and Hamfest in Augusta, Maine. On June 15th, it's the Knoxville Hamfest and Electronics Convention, sponsoring the ARRL Delta Division Convention. That's in Knoxville, Tennessee. July 12th to the 13th, HAMCon Zion, sponsoring the ARRL Rocky Mountain Division Convention in St. George, Utah. And don't forget to search the ARRL Hamfest and Convention database to find events in your area.
The nature of ham radio and the nature of nature itself connected in a very big way last month in the Caribbean as hams in Puerto Rico enjoyed the simultaneous activation of more than 20 parks throughout the island on the same day. One of the organizers, Emilio, WP4KEY, said May 26, 2024, has been written in gold letters in the Book of Amateur Radio in the Caribbean because this has been the largest event to be held. It was as much a celebration as an activation. Hams participated from the Amateur Radio Alliance, KP4ARA, the Lattice Radio Club, KP4NET, and numerous other groups worked stations in South America, Australia, Europe, the U.S., and elsewhere in the world. Emilio went on to say that this was the second event of its kind, but the inaugural Mega POTA, held on November 16, 2019, was nowhere near this size. Emilio added that a Mega POTA offered for activators a unique experience that blends technology with the great outdoors, and hunters a unique opportunity to get those sometimes difficult to get clubs and parks, including some for the first time as activators. Emilio activated with his wife Wanda, KP4NYC, and his son Emilio, KP4HBK. Mega POTA 2025 is already in the works. Emilio said that next year's activations will include more demonstrations for members of the public stopping by and offer guided tours of the island's cultural and natural attractions. Next year he expects to have even more to celebrate.
Several groups of Summits on the Air hams have decided to declare June 8th and 9th a big Summits on the Air weekend. SOTA activators in Switzerland and France are preparing for their respective mountain activation days during the weekend. In Wales, the big summit-to-summit event on Saturday the 8th will be followed by a hog roast. VHF is not left out, with a Spanish VHF SOTA-FM event on the 8th, and in England, the 144 MHz Backpackers Scaling Summits on June 9th. If propagation is cooperative, all this could create some very full logs. Even when there's no organized international effort, sometimes enthusiasm seems to help things along.
The annual international-style on-foot tea hunt wrapped up in late May at Mission Bay Park in Vacation Village, San Diego, California. This year's transmitter hunt featured a total of 34 individuals, with 29 of them attempting to locate the 5 hidden transmitters strategically located around the island. Bill Wright, WB6CMD, was the single-team winner, with 5 teas found in just 35 minutes. The two-person team of Matt Tucker, N6EAU, and Ed Hall, formerly KI6JMK, took first place with 5 teas located in 80 minutes. The 3-person, 3-generation team of Tim Marshall, AJ6XP, with son Ian and grandson Isaac, found 5 teas in 2 hours and 15 minutes, and a second 3-person team of Michael Weekly, K6MRW, Gentima, and Anna B found 3 teas in just 90 minutes. There was also a 5-person, 3-generation team of Bill Eckerton, W6ZM, Robin Eckerton, KM6OUL, and Brian, Nikki, and Noah. They discovered 5 teas in 87 minutes. For more information on the international-style tea hunts, visit www.homing-in.com.
The 13 Colonies special event will take place July 1st through the 7th, 2024. Operating times are July 1st, 1300 UTC to July 8th, 0400 UTC. 13 special call signs will be on the air, each one representing one of the original 13 British colonies that were established in 1607. 3 additional bonus call signs will be on the air representing Great Britain, France, and Philadelphia. All HF bands can be used, including the work bands, with the exception of 60 meters. Simplex on 2 meters and 6 meters is encouraged. The southeastern stations on the East Coast are very close to each other. It will be harder for these states to contact each other, so use of 40 through 160 meters is encouraged. All modes of operation may be used, including SSB, CW, RTTY, and digital. The mode of operation is up to the individual colony state station. More information about logs, call signs, and QSL certifications can be found at the annual 13 Colonies special event page on the web.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
SpaceX is targeting June 6 for the 4th test flight of its Starship Mega rocket, aimed to demonstrate the rocket's ability to survive reentry, according to the founder and CEO Elon Musk. This objective marks a crucial step in improving the flexibility and reusability of the world's most powerful rocket following 3 prior test flights that showcased its capacity to reach space. On May 20th, SpaceX carried out a crucial test by loading over 10 million pounds of super-cold methane and liquid oxygen propellant into the Super Heavy booster and the Starship upper stage. This practice countdown, which concluded before engine ignition, was one of the last major tests before the rocket's flight. Following the test, the launch team drained the propellants, and ground crews removed the Starship's upper stage to perform additional work on its heat shield. The next steps included installing the rocket's self-destruct mechanism to be used if the vehicle deviates off course and securing a commercial launch license from the Federal Aviation Administration. The FAA is reviewing the results of SpaceX's precious Starship test flight in March, which was classified as a mishap after the vehicle lost control and disintegrated during re-entry. SpaceX has requested the FAA approve the upcoming launch before the mishap investigation concludes, arguing that the previous flight didn't pose a public safety risk. An FAA spokesperson indicated this could expedite the licensing process if no public safety issues are identified. Meanwhile, SpaceX is preparing hardware for multiple rockets scheduled to fly later this year and building additional launch sites in Texas and Florida to support the increased launch frequency. However, significant design challenges remain before Starship becomes fully operational. Unlike the March test flight, which included several experiments, such as payload bay door operations and liquid oxygen transfer, the upcoming mission will concentrate on controlling the re-entry of both the Super Heavy booster and the Starship upper stage. Both components broke apart during the descent in the last flight. SpaceX aims for the Super Heavy booster, named Booster 11, to achieve a controlled splashdown in the Gulf of Mexico, while the Starship upper stage, known as Ship 29, will attempt to survive the extreme re-entry conditions. The rocket is equipped with about 18,000 hexagonal heat-absorbing ceramic tiles to protect its stainless steel structure during the re-entry, where temperatures can reach approximately 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit. Musk indicated that assuming a successful splashdown, SpaceX could attempt landing a Super Heavy booster back at the Texas launch pad as early as the 5th test flight later this year. However, due to harsher re-entry conditions from orbital velocity, landing the Starship upper stage might take longer. NASA, which selected Starships to ferry astronauts to and from the moon for its Artemis program, is closely monitoring these developments. A critical milestone for NASA is the in-orbit engine restart, necessary for guiding Starship towards a controlled re-entry and future lunar missions. While this capability will not be tested on the next flight, achieving reliable engine performance remains a primary focus. For us, primarily, it's the successful flight of these Raptor engines and achieving the main stage with all of them on Booster 11, said Lisa Watson-Morgan, manager of NASA's Human Landing System. The next flight aims to ensure consistent engine performance, crucial for SpaceX and NASA's lunar ambitions. Reigniting Raptor engines in space is essential for future missions, but SpaceX is taking a step-by-step approach. If we can't light all 33 engines on the boosters, and if we can't light all 6 engines on the ship, then we're going to have trouble getting to where we need to go, said Watson. It's basically a building block approach. As SpaceX prepares for its 4th Starship test flight, focused on surviving re-entry, represents a critical hurdle in its mission to develop a fully reusable rocket system capable of reaching and returning from space.
Created just this past February, the STEM Amateur Radio Club is already generating quite a bit of news. Kids and balloons naturally go together, but when the kids, some as young as 9, are ham radio operators, you can bet that what fires them up more than anything are pico balloons. With Bill Brown, WB8 ELK, as her mentor, Vicki Carnes, AD3I, who started the club, guided the youngest in launching 2 pico balloons from the Xenia Fairgrounds during Hamvention. They are now preparing for a launch near Andrew Jackson State Park in South Carolina during field day using the club's call sign N4TVV-1. Vicki believes this is amateur radio showcasing some of its most educational moments to young hams. She said the really awesome thing about pico ballooning, other than the technical side, is kids learning about world geography, and it sticks with them. I think it stays with them because it's personal. Their balloon's tracking means something to them. In short, if they don't know anything about the Aleutian Islands or the Canary Islands before, they do now because the one surviving balloon, W8BI-12, had those locations on its very trackable path. It recently completed a circumnavigation of the globe 8 miles above the planet, and the kids are along for the ride. If you want to share tracking its 2-meter signal with them, visit aprs.fi, the live APRS map, and in the top right corner, enter the call sign.
Robert Theiss, W5ITR, had the pleasure of interviewing Dan White, AD0CQ, from the Libre Space Foundation at the 2024 Dayton Hamvention about their innovative SatNOGS project. This initiative enables anyone to set up a satellite ground station, collect valuable data, and contribute to global satellite operations. Dan explained that SatNOGS provides detailed blueprints and documentation for building a satellite ground station from scratch. The foundation offers the necessary software, identifies accessible hardware, and maintains the infrastructure that allows citizen scientists to engage in satellite-related sciences. Their vision of making outer space open and accessible through open-source technology is truly inspiring. Setting up a basic SatNOGS station is surprisingly straightforward. All you need is a Raspberry Pi and an RTL SDR dongle. Dan explained that the Libre Space Foundation provides a ready-to-use image for the Raspberry Pi, which includes the operating system and necessary configurations. You just create an account, register your station, and schedule a test observation. For those looking to enhance their setup, SatNOGS offers extensive documentation on building antennas and integrating additional components like low-noise amplifiers and bandpass filters. Although they plan to offer kits in the future, you can currently follow the detailed instructions and suggested links available on the SatNOGS wiki. One of the most fascinating aspects of SatNOGS is its network of interconnected ground stations. Once your station is set up, it can schedule satellite passes and collect data even while you're asleep. This data is shared across the network, allowing other users to access it and vice versa. This system ensures continuous monitoring and data collection, maximizing the utility of each station. The SatNOGS community is highly active and supportive. The forums on the Libre Space Foundation's website are a great resource for troubleshooting, sharing experiences, and staying updated on new satellite launches and developments. For those interested in taking their ground station to the next level, SatNOGS supports more advanced setups with full azimuth and elevation rotators and larger antennas. These setups, while more costly, significantly increase data collection capabilities and overall performance. The Raspberry Pi used in the basic setup can interface with these advanced systems, allowing for automated tracking and data collection. Dan shared insights into practical aspects such as bandwidth requirements and equipment wear and tear. While the data collected by a SatNOGS station can be bandwidth intensive, there are settings to optimize for lower bandwidth situations by disabling audio uploads. Additionally, proper setup and maintenance of antennas and rotators can ensure long-term operation without significant issues. The Libre Space Foundation and its SatNOGS project provide a unique opportunity for anyone interested in satellite and space communications to get involved. Their open-source approach and comprehensive support make it accessible even for beginners. Setting up your own satellite ground station is a rewarding experience, contributing to global space exploration and satellite communication. Check out the resources at https://satnogs.org. Once again, that's https://satnogs.org and get involved.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a direct download on our website at www.twiar.net.
Amateur radio satellites were the reason Project Oscar came into being, from that first 22-day orbit by Oscar 1 in 1961, followed by subsequent satellites, a total of 121 Oscars over 6 decades. Now the organization is being dismantled, and AMSAT is to receive its remaining funds. AMSAT has also been given the right to use the term Oscar, which is an acronym for Orbiting Satellite Carrying Amateur Radio. AMSAT expressed its appreciation for the 64-year journey of the early organization and issued a statement on AMSAT News saying the large and growing amateur satellite community owes its existence to those early pioneers who decided that amateur radio had a place in space and made it happen. AMSAT is committed to upholding the legacy of those early pioneers and keeping amateur radio in space.
June's arrival means it's time to shine a little light on those beloved beacons of maritime safety, the lighthouses and lightships from around the world. The weekend event coming up in August is not a contest, but you might say there's a little bit of friendly competition going on right now among operators in various countries to see who can register as many of those historic structures as fast as they can. Lighthouses and lightships have typically transmitted reliable light beams to guide ships home from their journeys over the years. On August 17th and 18th, hams will be at many of those same sites, transmitting signals from Australia, Argentina, Germany, the United Kingdom, Belgium, South Africa, and the United States, and any other country that takes pride in the history that makes each of them so special. Some stations will be QRP, others may operate QRO. Some stations will be operated solo and others by teams. There are no restrictions, just some guidelines. Registration is not mandatory, but organizers strongly encourage it. Visit the website illw.net for details.
Federal Communications Commission Chair Jessica Rosenworcel proposed new rules May 29th to cover the risk of debris-generating accidental explosions in space. The new rules would require applicants to assess and limit the probability of accidental explosions to less than 1 in 1,000 for each satellite they submit for approval. The probability metric is derived from NASA's standard and would apply during and after the completion of mission operations. Currently, FCC rules only require satellite licensees to affirm they have effectively mitigated the risk of debris-generating explosions in space. While such explosions are very rare, Rosenworcel said incorporating a specific probability metric would support ongoing efforts to modernize FCC orbital debris rules to keep pace with increasingly crowded orbits. We can no longer afford to launch new satellites into our skies without being thoughtful about space sustainability, she said in a statement. Our orbital debris mitigation efforts will help preserve the orbital environment to protect services we rely on and allow new services to be launched. If approved by a majority of the FCC's 5 commissioners, the new requirement would be phased in 1 year after its publication in the Federal Register. It would then apply to applications filed after or still pending when the rules go into effect.
It's no secret that leaders such as Gordon West, WB6NOA, and Carol Perry, WB2MGP, stand for some of the very best of what we can give back to amateur radio. Recognizing this, awards carrying their names are given each year at the HAMChallenge in Orlando, Florida, where the next convention is set for February 7th through the 9th of 2025. The HAMChallenge Committee will accept nominations for these recognition awards through November 1st. Hams whose efforts have been focused on the nurturing and advancement of young radio operators may be nominated for the Carol Perry Educator of the Year Award, which is bestowed on an individual who has made an outstanding contribution to educating, mentoring, and advancing youth in amateur radio. Nominees for the Gordon West Ambassador of the Year Award should demonstrate ambassadorship in the true sense of the word, engaging in volunteer efforts that include promoting amateur radio at public events, fostering understanding among non-amateurs, and helping spread goodwill. You'll find additional information about the awards and the nomination forms at the Orlando HAMChallenge website.
Hi, I'm Terry Saunders, N1KIN, one of the anchors for This Week in Amateur Radio, and I have a few questions. Do you have a good radio voice? Do you have a quiet recording space, own a professional broadcast microphone and DAW software, and know how to use them? Can you commit to a same-day turnaround when given a script assignment? If you answered yes to all of these questions, and you're willing to volunteer your time to give a little something back to the ham radio hobby, then lend us your voice and join our anchor team for This Week in Amateur Radio. To learn more and see if you have what it takes, contact George Bowen, W2XBS, via email at w2xbs77@gmail.com or look him up on qrz.com.
And finally this week, helicopters that fly around carrying gigantic flat antenna arrays are uncommon. But when you spot one, it's not exactly intuitive to figure out what they're doing. But these helicopters are tasked with important geological work. In the popular imagination, the Earth's magnetic field is useful for finding north with a compass. In day-to-day life, that barely comes up, and we don't give the magnetic field much thought beyond that. However, the reality of Earth's magnetic field is that it's variable all over the surface of our planet. By measuring it, we can gain great insight into what lies beneath our feet. You can do magnetic surveys much faster using a helicopter instead. The basic theory is the same. Carrying a magnetic sensor over terrains allows the measurement of the local magnetic field. The difference is that a helicopter can move much faster and thus cover a greater area more quickly, albeit at somewhat reduced resolution. Magnetic field data is great, but there's so much more that can be gained by exploring the electromagnetic spectrum too. To work at low frequencies, large antennas are needed. This rig transmits at a base frequency of just 25 hertz. Magnetic surveys are an important tool in geology and archaeology. In the latter regard, they were perhaps best popularized by the TV show Time Team. The series would often employ geomagnetic surveys to discover artifacts or structures beneath the ground. The typical technique used on the show involved someone walking around a site with a magnetometer while logging the field strength as they went. By running the magnetometer in a grid pattern across a site, it was possible to build up a local map of the magnetic field, which could reveal anomalies lurking underground. So these choppers with the big dangling antennas are doing the same, be it on a much larger scale.
This Week in Amateur Radio is heard on nets and repeaters around the country and around the world, on great repeater systems like WA3PBD repeater system, on Thursday evenings at 7:30 p.m. on 146.730 and 223.940, covering all of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and beyond. Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.